And now we're going to start the Vav Amid Beis. The last three words, Omole Abaye. Abaye is talking to Rava, or to Rav Yosef, and he's saying that according to your logic, if something is royal klovim, entering into Yontif, turning Ben Hashmosh of Erev Yontif, then it's Muchan Li Adam, and it's not subject to Muktzah. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. This is the objection of Abaye. Hashta, I'm going to make a Kal V'chomer. I'm going to prove to you that Muchan Li Adam, Lo Avi Muchan Li Klovim. Again, this all has to do with Rabbi Yehuda's sheet of Muktzah. Rabbi Yehuda is very machmir Muktzah, and if you have something that's royal Adam, you're not allowed to use it for Klovim. And how much more so if it's only royal Klovim, it shouldn't be Muchan Li Adam. Tisnan, we have a mission at the end of Masechet Shabbos, Mechatchim es adluim lifnei habehem. That means on Shabbos you're allowed to cut up animal food, in this case a vegetable or gourd, dluim, or what do they call it in English, a pumpkin. And usually we don't allow you to extend yourself. That's called a tircha yisera on Shabbos. But for the sake of feeding your animals, we're going to allow it. Again, keep in mind, we're talking about Dluim Tlushim. They're not attached to the karka. They're attached to the karka. That's a malacha d'oraisa of Ktsira. Furthermore, the Mishnah establishes, as Hadavel, you could cut up a carcass of an animal. The animal died on Shabbos. Lifnei HaKlovim. And feed the dogs the carcass of an animal that dropped dead on Shabbos. And that's Reb Shimon, because Reb Shimon is Mekil, he's very lenient as far as Muktzah. But Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no, wait a second. If Lo Hoysed available of Shabbos, if going into Shabbos the animal was alive and it only died on Shabbos Asura, then you cannot use this carcass on Shabbos to feed it to the dogs, because it's muktzah. Because this animal during its lifetime was not omedes, it was not what you'd call an behema omedes leklovim. On the contrary, what do you do with an animal that's alive? You shecht it and you eat it, human consumption. So we see clearly that muchan li adam lo avi muchan lebehema. And if you accept the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda's machmir muktzah, then the fact that it is designated for human consumption excludes animal consumption, and we introduce muktzah. And now Abai says, muchan leklovim avi muchan li adam. In the reverse case, the other side of the coin, you have something that's designated for the animals, and they're going to tell me it's muchan li adam. How could that be? I don't understand Rabbah. Rabbah just finished telling us on Omid Aleph that the answer to protect Rav from the Kasha from the Beitza is that since the Egel is Muchan Mibod Yom for animals, therefore there's no Muktzah, meaning that Muchan Leklovim is Muchan Li'adam. And a frach is not muchan leklovim, and therefore it's not muchan li'adam. But in the case of a para, we apply the principle of muchan lebehema leklovim avi muchan li'adam. So what are you talking about? If muchan li'adam lo avi muchan leklovim, then muchan leklovim lo avi muchan li'adam. It's two sides of the coin. Amalei. So Rabbah responds to Abaye in. It's true that muchan li'adam lo avi muchan leklovim, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Why? You have something that's fit and suitable for human consumption, then you're not going to throw it to the dogs. But muchan leklavim, havi muchan li'adam. If you have something that could feed the dogs, then it's muchan li'adam as well. Why did I think the inish? I called me the chazile. A person has in mind when he goes into Yontif that anything that he'll need and serves his purpose, for example, the egel that's inside the Me'e HaPara Treifa, The mindset is that in Yulad Bechag Yishchatenu V'yochlenu. If it'll be born during the course of Yom Tov, it'll check and it'll eat it. So that as far as Das HaAdam is concerned, Mucha L'Klav Mavi Mucha L'Adam, because a person has a broad Das. But if you have something that's Mucha L'Adam, he's not going to waste it on feeding the dogs. Tanya Kavose de Rav. We have a brisa to support Rav. Tanya Kavose de Shmuel v'Temer Rav Yochanan. So what's the din of an efrach that hatched, the chickie came out of its shell on Yom Tov? Tanya Kavose de Rav, that it's asur. Egel shenolad b'yontif mutar, but efrach shenolad b'yontif asur. And the brisa itself explains, my hefresh, Beitza, so what's the difference between the egel that was nolad on Yontif and the efrach that was nolad on Yontif? And the brisa answers, Zeh muchan agav imo b'shchita, v'zeh eno muchan agav imo. In the case of an egel as opposed to an efrach, the egel, through the achana of the mother, because had they shechted the mother, they could have taken out the egel and eaten it. Therefore, there's no muktzah. But in the case of efrach, there's no possibility of vis-a-vis this efrach of shechting it, and therefore it's not muchan, it's muktzah. But Tanya Kavos is really Temer Rabbi Yochanan, egel shenolad b'yontiv mutar, v'efrach shenolad b'yontiv mutar, both are mutar. My timer, zeh muchan agav imo, v'zeh matis atzmo b'shchita. In the case of the egel, you have hachana agav imo. That means if you shechted the mother, the para, you would have the egel shechted already, and that's hachana for the egel. In the case of an efrach, matir atzmo b'shchita, as we said before, when the egg is hatched and the chickie now comes to life, it's a chai as opposed to a domain, and it's a birya chadasha, and therefore there's no isam muktzah. But we learned in the brisa, efrach shenolad b'yontif asur, and that means that there's an isam muktzah. But Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer af b'yemos hachol asur lefi shelo nispatchu einov. So this is going to be a sugya later on, that at what point does an efrach have the status of a chai, and its later was complete, and now you can check it? Because if it's too early of a stage in the development of the efrach, for example, lo nispatchu einov, the eyes do not open. I don't know if you've seen a little chickie after it's born, the eyes are closed. Then it's called the sheretz. It's not a viable bird, live developed bird at that time, at that point, and therefore there's no shechita. So therefore, if an efrach was born even on a weekday, you'd not be allowed to eat it soon after it is hatched until the eyes open up. I don't know how long it takes till the eyes open up. We can find out. So Gemara says, Kimana Azla Hadisanya. We're going to quote a brisa. I'm going to try to figure out to which shita can we attribute the authorship of this brisa. And we're darshaning a pasuk in Vayikra Yud Aleph in the parish of Shrotzen. L'chol hasheretz hashoritz ala oretz, and the brisa says l'rabos, the extra word l'chol, l'rabos efrochim shelo nispatchu eineim kiman ki Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So this brisa clearly, explicitly reflects the shita Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and we prohibit an efrach even if it was hatched on a weekday, as long as it hasn't opened his eyes. Rav Huna Beitza im Yitziasa Nigmara. Rav Huna says in the name of Rav that when the egg leaves the body, it's laid from the hen, its creation is complete and is considered like a Beitza Gemura. But if it hasn't yet laid the egg, and you find the egg inside the mei targolis, that means you shechted the mother, the hen, and you found complete developed eggs inside the mother, it's not considered a Beitza Gemura. A Beitza Gemura is only after the egg was laid. But if you shech the mother and you find an egg inside, that's not called a Beitza Gemura. So the Gemara says, "My, what exactly did Rav have in mind when he said a Beitza Yitzias and Nigmara? If he was telling you that you're allowed to eat a Beitza as if it was parva together with milk, and it ceases to be part of the basar of its mother, because as long as it's part of the basar of its mother, if you eat it with milk, you violate an iser of basar b'chala. And now the hen laid the egg. Once the hen lays the egg is no longer part of the body of the mother hen. It's no longer basar, and therefore you can eat it with challah. The implication of Rav's ruling is that ha b'mei imo, if you shech the mother and you find eggs inside the mother, asur they have a status of basar. The transformation between basar and beitza takes place with leda. But if there was no leda, you just simply shechted the mother and you found eggs inside, those eggs are basar, you're not allowed to eat them with challah. I would suggest that if you have such an egg, you take a magic marker and write on it at least the letter Beitz or Bisari. Imagine, there's some people, they put a raw egg into the cholent on Erev Shabbos. And there's meat in the cholent. If it's a good cholent, there's plenty of meat. So the egg becomes flacious. If you eat it on Shabbos with your cholent, that's fine. After Shabbos, you have a problem. Usually those eggs are very brown, so it's discernible. It's like cookies. If you make cookies, milchik cookies, it's a problem. Nobody realizes that these cookies have milk in them. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If that's what Rav had in mind for Asanya, that he's contradicted by a Bryce, the Bryce says, Hashochet es hatarnagoles umatza b'beitzim gmuros mutaras li'achlam b'chol. Even though the egg was not laid yet, we discovered it after shchita. We found it in the kishkis of the hen. We're allowed to eat it with chalav. It's a parva egg. And why is that? Because the Beitza Gemura, it's completely developed. And it has a status of a Beitza. It's no longer basar, even before the Leda. That's against Rav. Rav says it's only a Yitziasa Nigma. Ella says the Gemara, you know what? I'm going to have to reinterpret Rav. Im Yitziasa Nigma, you know what Rav had in mind? That if the egg was laid on Yontif, Muteres liyachla b'yantif. Why? Because it was completed and developed on Chol before Yantif. The implication is, b'mei imo asur liyachla b'yantif. If he shechts a hen on Yontif and he finds eggs inside, then says Rav, you're not allowed to eat those eggs on Yontif. And Rashi identifies this with Hachana de Rabba. It means that since this egg was completed on Yontif, or, you know what, let's give a better case. Let's say the Yontif was on a Sunday, And now we're going to apply the principle of Hachana D'Rabba because the completion of the egg was on Shabbos, and Ein Shabbos Meichel Yontif. We need Chol to be Meichel Yontif. So that means that even if you find an egg inside the mother hen after Shechita, that hen, that Beitza was prepared yesterday, which was Shabbos, because Yontif is on a Sunday, and we are applying now the principle of Hachana D'Rabba. So the Gemara raises the following kasha. Vatanya, we have a Beitza Shokidas the Tana goes to Motzu Bebesim Gemuros Mutaros Liachlan B'Yontif. How could Rav argue with a Beitza that explicitly askins that when you shecht a hen on Yontif and you find fully developed eggs inside the belly of the hen, you're allowed to eat them on Yontif? And Rav says it was also against the Beitza. So now the Gemara wants to say, you know what? Maybe we don't accept this Beitza. And the reason we don't accept this Beitza is not just to defend Rav, but also because this Beitza is against the Mishnah. The Chitem, and if you'll suggest, in order to defend Rav, that kamashmal and bebraysa maidelo ashmin and b'masnisa, and the Beitza is telling us something that's not in the Mishnah, and the Beitza is telling me a chiddush din, which was a deliberately omitted from the Mishnah, and that chiddush din is that if you open up the hen and you find eggs inside of the intestines of the mother hen, then you're allowed to eat those eggs on Yontif. So the Gemara says, I have to reject this. You cannot tell me that the Mishnah, because it didn't say anything about allowing, right? Well, what do we have in the Mishnah? We have Beis Hillel who says, Beitza Shenolda B'Yontif Asura. So that's a case of a Beitza Shenolda. What would be in a case of Beitzim inside the mother of the Tarnagolas? Maybe in that case, Rabbi Beis Hillel would agree that it's mutter. So the Gemara says, no, Hanami Tnina. The Mishnah says, Beitza Shenolda B'Yontif, Beit Shammai Omrim Teyacha, Beis Hillel Omrim Lo Teyacha. Ad kan lo pliga Beis Hillel Beit Shammai Ella in Nolda. The Mishnah explicitly addressed the case of a Beitza Shenolda, not a case where you shechted the mother and you found the complete developed eggs inside the mother's hishkis. Avol b'mei iman divrei hakol sharion. Beis Hillel would agree that the eggs inside the mother are mutter. And that supports the Beitza that we just quoted, that Ashokeres Taragos Matzav Beitzim Gemurus Mutaras Liachlam B'Yontif. How then can Rav paskin that in this very case where he opened up the Tarnagolos and he found eggs inside, that these eggs are muktzah? It's against the Mishnah, against the Beitza. It's against the Beitza explicitly. It's against the Mishnah by implication. The Chitem, and now you'll say, wait a minute. Beis Hillel never explicitly was quoted as being matir the case of Beitzim b'mei iman, and therefore Beis Hillel afilu b'beitzim b'mei iman namias. When Beis Hillel said that a Beitza Shenolda B'Yontif is also, it's lav dafka. It doesn't have to be nolda. It's a Beitza that you found inside the mother that's also considered muktzah. So this was further strengthened our objection to Rav. To Rav. How could Rav say? Just 1 second. Oh no, I'm sorry. The chitema, I made a little mistake. The chitema is an attempt on the part of the Gemara to defend Ra. That even if you open up the Tarnagoles through Shchita on Yontiv and you find the eggs inside, those eggs are prohibited. I, Beis Hillel, only addressed the case of Beitza Shenolda b'Yontiv. Hi, the Tani Nolda lo dicha kochan de Beit Shammai. The afilu Nolda nami shor. There was a havamina to say that in the case of Nolda, it should be awesome. But if you find Beitzim Gemuros inside the Tarnagoles, that should be mutter. So maybe lo dicha kochan de Beit Shammai, the Mishnah mentioned the case of Beitza Shenolda to tell you that even a Beitza Shenolda is not muktzah. Now, as far as Beis Hillel is concerned, they would prohibit in both cases, whether it's Beitza Shenolda or it's a Beitza Nimtzeis B'Mei Tarnagoles. And Rav was accepting that psak in that interpretation of Beis Hillel. So the Gemara rejects it. Elahad Sanya, we have a brisa which we quoted earlier. Shashocheres hatarnagoles u'motza b'beitzim gemuros mutaras liachla b'yontiv, which seems to imply that it's only mutter because he found the eggs inside the mother hen when he shechted the mother. But the implication is that beitzim shenoldu b'yontiv would be asuros. Mani, whose sheet is that? You just set up two extreme cheetahs. That Beit Shammai on Mekil, even in the case of Beitza Shenolda, and Beis Hillel Machmir, even in the case of Matzaba Beitzim Gemuros B'mei Iman. And now the Brisa seems to make a middle of the road compromise shita. That in the case of Matzah B'Beitzim B'mei Iman Mutaris, in the case of Beitza Shenolda Asuros, that doesn't fit neither into Beit Shammai nor into Beis Hillel. And based on this, the Gemara rejects this interpretation of Rav and suggests another interpretation. Ella, says the Gemara, you know what Rav means that Beitzim Yitzias and Nigmara? He means to tell you, Megadeles Efrochim, that if the hen lays an egg and there's a little chickie inside that egg, then if you want to, it's kind of like an incubation kind of. What you do is after the egg is laid, in order to guarantee the development of the efrach, of the chickie inside the egg, you take a tarnagoles, a mother hen, and you sit it down on top of the egg, and it heats up the egg, and that heat will cause the process of development of the efrach. However, if you have an egg that you discovered, you found it after the shechita, the mother, it's not developed enough. And even if you would put a tarnagoles on top of that egg, the efrach would never hatch. Now, all this is very fine biology, but why did Rav have to tell me anything about biology? But what's the halachic implications of Rav's statement? Where it says, when you go to the eggman, what kind of eggs do you order? Do you order eggs that are megadol efrochim or eggs la'achila, simply for eating purposes? If you're ordering eggs for eating purposes, then he can supply you with eggs that were found inside the mother hen after shechita. But if, on the other hand, you aren't interested in eating the egg, you wanted to develop the chickie, so that it would hatch. And you're a chicken farmer, you sell chickens. So you want to multiply your flock of chickens. In that case, you're not ordering eggs that were found inside Mei Iman, because those eggs are not Megadol Efrochim. And now the Gemara is going to tell us a story about Mekach Tos, where a person ordered eggs from a live chicken that were laid from a live chicken, and instead the mocher delivered him eggs that he discovered inside the kishkis of the hen after shechita. And Rabbi Ami is going to paskin that that's considered a mekach tov. Okay, then, so here's where we're going to stop. And in Beitza Shem, I will hopefully upload Daf Zayin and Daf Ches, which are the 2 days of Yom HaRichta of Rosh Hashanah, so that if you have access to YU Torah, in Beitza Hashem, you'll be able to hear those shiurim, so that on Som Gedalia, we'll be picking it up on Daf Tes. Okay, then, let me wish you a good Kibben Sh'yar, Shana Tova, and thank you so much.